What's up, Fins fans? Jim Grieshaber, call me Gries, and I only have one question. Too little, too late.
Hey, I'm Zgonina, and it's Thirsty Thursday. I'm getting ready to dive into some Dolphin news.
Thirsty Thursday sounds good as we get ready for Quinn Ewers against the Bengals. Z, I'm feeling that one.
Fins up. It's the Dolphins Squad. Everything Miami Dolphins, every week. Breaking down all the big hits and game-changing plays from South Beach. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Sunshine, speed, and squad goals. The Dolphins Squad Show starts now.
Yes, it does. This episode brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long on FanDuel. And one of the biggest things we were betting on throughout the course of the year was, would Tua Tagovailoa make it through the season as the Miami Dolphins starting quarterback? And Z and Kyle are here. We're going to get right into it. But first, look at the rundown. It's pretty much all Tua today, right? Quinn Ewers to make his first career start, the 7th-round draft pick. Not his first career appearance. Remember, he played in Cleveland, and that went really well. But sarcastic, of course. But what's next for the Dolphins quarterback room? Why is Zach Wilson not going to be the guy? And why are you elevating Ewers? What's next for Tua? Mike McDaniel? How does this all work out for him? The future of the franchise. And, of course, with this season pretty much in the books, the Bengals coming in town, the game that was flexed off of Sunday night before they even knew the Dolphins were eliminated, Z. But, you knew something was coming. I wasn't sure we'd see Tua get benched this year or not, because we talk about it all the time on the show. Mike's future is so tied into Tua, but now it's not anymore, and he goes to the bench. Your thoughts on this?
Well, yeah, I mean, usually, when a team's out of the playoffs and a certain position is struggling, it could be quarterback, it could be running back, it could be defensive tackle, it could be a linebacker. A lot of teams want to see their young players play, especially in real football games. I know there's no meaning for the Dolphins in these games, but for the players, there is some meaning for next year to stay on the squad, to show what they can do, especially a young player, and I mean, shoot, everybody should be happy, in the chat room because they finally got what they wanted, the benching of the quarterback, and bringing someone else in. They may not be happy that they went with the rookie, but again, time for him to show what he can do because they drafted him for a reason. He's on this team for a reason. So now we're going to see on Sunday.
And I guarantee you that reason, Kyle, was not for him to start this year. Definitely not, right? So now it's happened. And by the way, great job covering this on the Locked On Podcast Network, the Locked On Dolphins YouTube, and everywhere you get your audio versions. Kyle's been killing it ever since this news broke yesterday. But I led with this, Kyle, and I'll stay with it. The plan was not to start him this year by any means. It was a future development pick, we thought at the time, and that future is now.
Well, if you're a future development pick and the coach doesn't know if he's going to be here beyond 3 weeks from now, I think it behooves you to kind of figure out, what do we have here? I think it serves as kind of one of the last judgments on the ledger of pros and cons of Mike McDaniel is, Mike's kind of had eyes on Quinn Ewers going back to the Texas Pro Day the year before he came out, where he was throwing to all those wide receivers, the A.D. Mitchell, Jatavian Sanders. They had a good skill group there at Texas, and Miami had a big showing at that Pro Day. Mike was there, and from what I understand, he's kind of Ewers in the way he threw the ball, and it stood out to Mike. And you go through the whole draft process the following year, and you bring him in, and we've been waiting to see somebody run this offense competently that's not named Tua Tagovailoa, right, for 4 years now, whether that was accomplished players like Teddy Bridgewater, whether that was another drafted guy in Skylar Thompson who never got better in 3 years. And when he had to play in 2024, it looked like he never played in the offense before, despite the fact that he started a playoff game in 2022 as a rookie in it. And then, the kind of Snoop Huntley comes in with a little bit of a different skill set, goes 2 and 3 as a starter, but the passing offense did not look functional. So I think this is kind of Dolphins. They told us in 24, they were pushing the limits of what the offense was capable of. They made some coaching changes. They added some people to the coaching staff, Bobby Slowick, who's another former offensive coordinator with the Texans. Sounds like they kind of shuffled some things around for how the offense works. And now we get another chance to see somebody not named Tua Tagovailoa run the offense. And I understand it's a rookie, but if it's yet another guy that goes on the list and the Dolphins are getting 140 passing yards a game or they're struggling with turnovers, it's just going to add more fuel to the fire for that conversation about what Mike McDaniel would look like moving forward without Tua Tagovailoa.
It is crazy, right? We knew some heads would roll, and the win streak probably saved this from happening for a few weeks anyway, Z. But when I look back at this season, and we'll have a lot more time to reflect in the offseason because we're going to be here twice a week all year long with your Dolphins Squad Show on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and the world's #1 sports podcast network. So we knew heads were going to roll, Z, and we were wondering all year if it would be Mike. So we're going to talk more about Mike's future later, but for now, he survives. For now, Mike McDaniel still the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. I hate to say that phrase for now because that makes it seem like it's inevitable that he's going to be fired, Z, but I don't think it's anything close to inevitable that he's going to be fired no matter what happens the rest of this year.
No, I mean, he'll make it through the year, and then they'll decide afterwards what's going to happen with, Mike's future. But again, who knows? This quarterback could turn out to be another Brock Purdy. He's a 7th rounder. I mean, you never know. I mean, Trent Green was an 8th rounder. Fucking the GOAT was a fucking 6th rounder. Excuse my language. But, I mean, you never know what's going to happen. It's a good chance to see what this kid can do, and if he's a good, solid backup, then they have a plan, for next year. Get someone else or draft one, And
the thing that really stood out to me about Tua this year more than anything, obviously there's a lot of throws he can't make. And they did a lot offensively to play to his strengths, right? And they built the whole offense around that, and they brought the weapons in. Tyreek is done, and that really hurt things. And saw someone say it, and I can't remember who. Everybody's been talking. It might have been you, Kyle, when someone said, and I saw it yesterday. It was I can't remember. It was about, never mind. It was something about Wilson and Quinn Ewers. But the thing about Tua, 6 of 10 through 3 quarters for 95 yards the other night. He looked a little gun shy, right? He really looks gun shy back there. He looks like he doesn't want to get hit anymore. And who could blame the guy, right? If he doesn't want to get hit anymore. But the thing that really stood out to me more than anything about Tua, Kyle, is his lack of accountability is just, it's ostentatious to me. He doesn't take accountability for anything without throwing somebody else under the bus. Even after this loss to Pittsburgh, the 28-15 loss, he says, for one, I got to play better. I got to be better for our guys offensively. 2, I'm pretty disappointed with, here's the part. You ready? I'm pretty disappointed with how ready I got our receivers in terms of operation, in terms of guys knowing where to line up and communication when it comes to personnel. That's something I harp on to guys when we're in our own player-led meetings. There's the player-led meeting again, Z. And I felt like I let our guys down in that aspect. Kyle, he can't even take accountability when he takes accountability.
Well, I mean, there's part of that feels like it's, I don't know if that's a jab at the other guys. I don't know if that's a jab at the coaching staff, but we're in year 4. I go back to this offseason. I'm in training camp, and I used a quote that Mike McDaniel had in OTAs in asking a question to Mike McDaniel. And I asked him about balancing new guys in the offense versus Tua, who's working on his mastery of the offense, is a phrasing that was used this offseason. So, for there to be some of these issues still, I don't know whose feet the blame needs to fall on that, but Tua certainly is not going to get the benefit of the doubt for any comments that he makes based off of some of the other things that have happened this offseason or this season. And you even look at how he was engaged with Jalen Ramsey after the game. The Dolphins are eliminated from the playoffs, and he's he-he-and with Jalen Ramsey on the field after the game, to the point where you got guys like J.J. Watt going on their platforms talking about how you have like a certain level of responsibility as the quarterback and the leader of the team to understand the optics of how it's going to be interpreted. And Tua is a guy that just doesn't get the benefit of the doubt. And right now he doesn't deserve the benefit of the doubt in that regard because of what the performance has been like and the number of issues that we've had. So I think all those things are extra things that maybe aren't why you sit Tua down, but they're extra reasons to be all that much more disappointed with the way that this season has played out for the guy who's your starting was your starting quarterback, and you chose to be one of the faces of your franchise.
Yeah, and the $53 million this year, and the 37 next year, 39 next year for Tua, $99 million cap hit if they get rid of him after this season. And it'd be desperate to trade for a guy like Kyler Murray. People talking about that. We mentioned it after the game because there's some similarities there with the situations, and the franchises need to move on, the quarterbacks need to move on. But for Tua Tagovailoa, and we'll get into his future a little bit more later in the show, guys, but definitely 2 years ago, man, coming in last season, I remember I was on ESPN Radio and I'm doing a show with Herm Edwards, and we picked our MVP dark horse, and I said maybe Tua has a chance to slide in there. Now remember, this is before last season, right? Before even the Jacksonville game when Tyreek got arrested, before any of that started happening. Everybody's thinking this offense is one of the best we've ever seen, and it's just gotten so bad so fast. Z, it really is incredible when you think about how far Tua has fallen and how fast it's happened.
Yeah, it sure has. I mean, again, I think a lot of the injuries probably have something to do with it, and he just, he gets shell shocked. You've seen quarterbacks do this in the past. It takes them a while to get out of it. Early on, the season, I made a comment where he took a hit and he got up, popped right up, and I was like, oh, maybe he got the rust off of him, but it didn't seem like it because he still was making bad decisions because he was afraid to take a hit. And again, it just snowballed.
How much of this is Tua, Kyle, in your opinion? How much of it's Tua? How much of it's the injuries that he's suffered? How much of it is Tyreek Hill these last couple of years? How much of it is, like Chris Carter said, interesting thoughts from former Dolphin receiver, NFL legend Chris Carter, saying the NFL has caught up to Mike McDaniel, Tua Tagovailoa, and the Miami Dolphins offense. How much do you think each one of those things factors in?
Well, I think that's why you made some of the coaching staff changes that you did if you were the Dolphins, and you made some of the personnel philosophical changes to invest a little bit more on the interior offensive line, right? It's okay, we're going to trade a 3 to go up in the second round and draft a guy, and we're going to pay James Daniels $24 million across 3 seasons, and we're going to really feel like we've upgraded what we had with Robert Jones and Liam Eichenberg, because they kind of were that original wide zone school of thought of, as long as we can give the offensive line tools to problem solve fronts, and then it's on the responsibility of the backs to make the blockers right in front of you because of the zone system. And you've seen kind of teams individually evolve out of that school of thought into putting more prioritization on the trenches, whether that's Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota and the money that they spent on a couple of Colts guys in free agency, or Sean McVay and how they've expanded and drafted a bunch of guys and paid guards $15-18 million a season. Like you've seen this school of thought evolve, and I think the Dolphins were in on that. I think the problem is that the evolutions that they've made, they just haven't been very proficient at running. So I think you'd reached a point where you'd hit the ceiling on what the schematics of the offense, the way it was originally constructed, was capable of. So you're trying to evolve, but you're trying to evolve while a lot of your investments up front took some time, or we've seen James Daniels for 3 snaps all season. And then for Tua individually, it's been a little bit less about the precision of the timing, right? Is the messaging the last month has been, we want conviction. And that was a word that Mike McDaniel used yesterday when talking about why they made the changes. I need a quarterback. He said, I need a quarterback that plays convicted. The team needs a quarterback that plays convicted. Tua is a precision passer. It's all about how many steps and at the top of the break and what's your exit angle, because when I hit the top of my drop, I need to trust you're going to be in this spot because I'm throwing into a tight window. And like they don't play like that right now because their success is displacement and violence and being reactive with the run game and, letting those explosive athletes make plays. There's one thing you cannot use to describe Tua Tagovailoa's skill set, and it is explosive. You can. Like it's not in the lexicon of things that he is. So I think you have this conflict of how they've been able to evolve the rest of the offense and whether or not Tua keeps up with it with what he does best. And I think that's why you've seen kind of this logjam the last month is the rest of the offense has really gotten humming. Tua is still going to be at his best when he's in rhythm. And it hasn't been there this year, right? Like there's been times where you get made to order looks and he gets to the top of the drop. And for whatever reason, he still doesn't throw the primary. And I think that's where he's regressed the most. But at the end of the day, I think it's just been this identity battle that you've been trying to change how you work your passing offense to have more eligibles that are available to you, how you change your offense stylistically to get away from a team or a defense catching up to you. And it just has not taken form. And now we're going to see somebody else try to do it.
What are your thoughts on that, Z, before we go to break? Just piggybacking off what Kyle said.
No, I see it all the way. I mean, the guy, he lost it. And again, like I said just a few minutes ago, it could be injuries, it could be, confidence, it could be whatever, and then when Mike went to the running game, the running game was rolling. And then, Tua, now he's going to try to press to get back to where they're passing every down and showing he could prove it. And he just couldn't do it.
He only had 4 games over 250 yards and 1 300-yard game, the Patriots game, all the way back in week 2. And you think about it, 2 3-game losing streaks in the first 7 games of the season. We thought we'd see this move a lot sooner. What went right? How did things turn around for Miami? They won some big games. They put up a bunch of points, and here we are still after the Pittsburgh loss with Tua going to the bench. We'll get Z and Kyle's thoughts on the other side. By the way, make sure you check out all of Kyle's great work on Locked On Dolphins, wherever you get your podcast, obviously on YouTube as well. We go live on YouTube with the squad every Wednesday at noon Eastern, except for yesterday. Thank you, everybody, for bearing with me. I had an emergency in my family. My daughter got really hurt yesterday, and it was a tough day. So I appreciate everybody, especially Z and Kyle, for sticking with me on that. But we have a lot to talk about. Kyle does a great job on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you check out all of that, as well as Z. And Z, what's that NFL show you're doing? Locked On what?
NFL Players Squad Show.
NFL Players Squad Show. It didn't take you long to advance in the world of broadcasting, Z. Already got
leaving you behind, Gries. Leaving you behind.
You should, man. That'd be good career advice for you. I'm Gries. That's Z. That's Kyle. It's Dolphins Squad Show on the Locked On Podcast Network, the world's #1 podcast network, and your team every day. Coming back, more Tua talk. What went right when things went right this season, and more on how we ended up here. And we will continue that talk in just a moment here on your Dolphins Squad Show. As soon as I get a chance to talk to you about Rocket Money. And I just am really excited anytime I hear the phrase Rocket Money, because think about that. Rocket Money. It's fast, right? And you ever feel like your money just disappears every month? Talking about fast. Yeah. A few subscriptions here, an impulse buy there, and suddenly the numbers in your bank account don't match the numbers in your head. Rocket Money helps you get clarity, track every dollar, and stay in control of your finances. As hard as that is in today's world, managing your money shouldn't feel like a second job. Rocket Money does the heavy lifting for you so you can save more and stress less. Rocket Money finds subscriptions you forgot you were paying for and helps you clean them up quickly. Seeing all your spending in one dashboard makes it easier to understand where your money's going. I really personally like how Rocket Money automatically builds budgets based on past spending, keeps you on track without overthinking it, kind of guiding you along the way. The bill alerts and spending notifications help you catch small things before they turn into big expenses, and having the app find good times to save each month keeps you consistent with your financial goals. So what are you waiting for? Take control of your finances and cancel your unwanted subscriptions with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, so there we go, guys. All right, Tua to the bench. Quinn Ewers, not Zach Wilson to start for the Dolphins. We'll get Kyle and Z's thoughts on that move as well. Looking at Quinn Ewers instead of Zach Wilson. There's big write-ups on Zach Wilson in the New York media today. You can imagine, right? After his time with the Jets and what's next for him. We'll talk. I don't think any Dolphins fan cares what's next for him if he's not going to play here, but we'll hit that a little bit. What's next for Tua? Where could he end up? Some teams where he could possibly be a fit, and maybe, just maybe, you get a Hail Mary, and a real Hail Mary on this one. Kyle, I'll start with you. A real Hail Mary, and you get someone to trade for him somehow. I mean, you look at, everybody talks about the Broncos, right? Kyle and Russell Wilson and what they did. You're going to cut him, or you're going to trade him, or you're going to bench him. At this point, you're not bringing him back as the starter next year. So looking at the different models that have taken place, and there's maybe 11 quarterbacks now making $50 million a year plus, and over half those guys aren't performing to those numbers, right? So Tua's not the only one, and the Dolphins aren't the only ones going through this. But I find it interesting that everybody looks at the Broncos model with Russell Wilson and hope Miami can get lucky the way the Broncos have and still be, I think, the best record in the AFC.
Yeah, and they drafted the 6th quarterback in the top 12 with Bo Nix. So there was a massive run on quarterbacks that all went in the top 12 in that year's class, and put them in a unique position to make that transition and find someone else to play the spot. And I think it was the right decision for Denver to move on from Russell Wilson based on the way that he plays the game. He's looking for big shots down the field, and then he's taking check downs. And if you're looking to work concepts and work intermediate areas of the field and intentionally go through progressions, like that's not really been something Russ has done very well since his last few years in Seattle. Like the whole let Russ cook thing was an experience that I think kind of opened everybody's eyes to, if you give him more control, it doesn't work. So what does Denver do? Well, they move on. They end up cutting him. They bite the bullet on the dead cap. I think the 2 years total on that dead cap was $85 million, which is a current record, unless the Dolphins move on from Tua, in which it would be $99 million in dead cap that you could split across 2 seasons. Now, the Dolphins, I'm sure, will, whether that's a Brock Osweiler type trade where we're going to send you the player and the pick and you're going to take a portion of the salary, or whether that's we're going to pay down the salary and we're going to get a negligible pick, or something similar to what they did with the Jalen Ramsey contract situation was we'll trade for another player back that has an equally unattractive contract, but at least it's a fresh start for, like, I'm sure those are things that they will explore. But the hard part of knowing this is Mike back? Is Champ Kelly going to be the GM? Is somebody else going to be the GM? Like, you can't even begin to have a plan on what it looks like until you know who's running the show. And I think that's why you saw the Dolphins move Tua when they made the decision to bench him and they put him as the emergency third. He's not just the backup. Like, he's not going to be counting against the active game day roster. You're going to need injuries to both Ewers and Zach Wilson to see Tua go back into a game. We're going to remove him as far as possible from the operation of getting ready and playing on game day. And I think that is, we're at a point, the games are no longer have playoff implications. Let's have him in a position where we don't have a development happen that's going to complicate whatever decision that's already a very difficult decision for our next GM. Let's not make it harder by continuing to play him, and then heaven forbid something happens, and now it's even harder, and we whittle down our options this offseason, whatever those look like, even more.
And Z, we talk a lot, and you surprised me a couple times with your answers, to be honest, when we've talked about the locker room and the dynamics between players. So you're in that locker room right now, and you get this news. And obviously the team hears it before any of us do, but you get this news. What's the reaction? What are the guys thinking? What are they saying? What's that mood in that locker room after something like this?
I mean, there is no really change. I mean, they change the player. It happens all the time. You know, you just keep going forward. Again, as a player, especially me as a player, I just worry about myself. You know, I got to worry about me playing good, so I'm not the guy getting benched or, you know, being pushed aside. You're always in that position, you know, at the end of the year. You know, they start bringing guys off practice squad to see what they can do, you know, and then you start losing playing time. You don't want that to happen to you, so you still have to go out there and perform. You're not going to sit there and have a pity party for a guy that just got benched because he wasn't playing up to what we needed to do to win. The coach made a decision. He made a decision. You move forward. I mean, you're not going to go on strike and not go out to practice because they benched the starting quarterback, you know. Yeah, to me, it's not a moot point in the locker room. Some guys will be like, oh, you know, but again, everybody wants to win. Everybody wants to play.
What about confidence in Ewers? The players have seen him in practice every day. He's been there enough time for them to get a read on him. And remember, he's the guy they brought in Cleveland too. So what does that feel like as a player right now in terms of confidence in a rookie QB coming in?
Oh, I'm sure the true leaders of the team, especially on offense, are going to, pump him up because they need him to perform. You know, you're not going to scare him and say, okay, Rook, you better do this, you better do that. I mean, I'm sure there are players like that, but I don't see it happening, there because those guys want to get the ball. The guys want to, play and win. So they're going to pump him up, they're excited for the kid to get his first NFL start. I mean, I remember when I almost got my first start, my rookie year. I ran out there and then they went to, nickel defense against Buffalo, and I came off the field on the first play and never got to start, and we had to wait 7.5 years till I got that start, but oh well, but it's exciting time for him, and the guys will rally around him.
Yeah, very exciting time for Quinn Ewers, Kyle. And real quick, we're going to get to Tua's future a little bit later in the show, but people are talking about Indy because of the Daniel Jones situation and the injury, and they looked like they had found their quarterback of the future, but people are talking about possibly Indianapolis being a place for Tua. And then the Raiders, interestingly enough, because Geno Smith has really not played well at all, took a big step back when he went there. And then the big one's the Cardinals, right? With Kyler Murray, neither team wants their guy anymore. They were once the future of the franchise, got the big money. Cardinals never wanted to give Murray that money to begin with, but they did, and they're paying for it dearly now in more ways than one. So those three, any other teams possibly standing out to you, Kyle, for him?
Yeah, I think if you're looking at Tua, it's probably going to be through the lens of competing for a starting job for a team that doesn't have a starter / a team that needs a quality backup, right? And I think that's where you can consider Indy, but they need to figure out the financials of a Daniel Jones contract extension. He was only there on a 1-year deal. I know they just activated Anthony Richardson's window to return from IR, so we'll see if we get a chance to see Richardson or if they're going to let Phillip Rivers run with it. So I think that's a team that has its own fair share of flux. I think the Raiders are an attractive team because they're an indoor team. But that said, you've got to play in Denver. You've got to play in Kansas City. You're not going to feel really good about that. Maybe a team like Detroit as a backup to Jared Goff if the Dolphins pay like the large enough portion of the salary where it would be financially worth it, because you're an indoor team. You get to play all your team. You're a cold weather team, but you play all your home games at home. You'd have to navigate potentially Green Bay, but Minnesota's inside, Chicago's outdoors. So there's, for the right price point, I'm sure there would be a team, and you would probably have to sweeten the price point by offering a draft compensation pick along with Tua if you're going to swing a trade. Now, if they don't get a bite, I think what they do have the luxury of is, because the cap implications are what they are, they can probably carry Tua through the draft and into the summer, kind of like what happened with Jalen Ramsey, and play it out and see if there's any added interest, because maybe a team strikes out in the draft and doesn't get a quarterback. Because if you were going to move on from Tua by cutting him, you would have to post June 1st cut him anyway, which means the salary cap figure he's going to be on your books for from the start of the league year until June 2nd is the same as what it is now anyway. So you won't feel any impact of moving on from Tua for better or for worse until June. So I think that's something that works in their favor. But selfishly, from my perspective, I would love to have some clarity and some resolution so that this offseason can be about moving forward with who's going to be here, right? And maybe that does include Tua as a backup, and they figure out the other contracts across the roster that they're going to shuffle, and they're going to keep him because whoever they bring in doesn't want to pay that money for a guy who's not going to be here. And I think if you make sweeping changes and there's a new GM and there's a new coach, I think you could put yourself in a position to go through next year and say, we're going to bring in competition to compete and somebody that can potentially start over you. But if we're going to pay you the money, you're going to be here. I think that's probably the most viable pathway for Tua to be back, because I have a hard time seeing if Mike is back with the way that this relationship has kind of frayed, that you would have that much more appetite to bring Tua back as well.
And Mike McDaniel, a big topic of conversation coming up a little bit later in the show. Before we hit the break, guys, I want to get your quick thoughts on Tyreek Hill. Speaking of June 1st, Kyle, that's a big date for Tyreek too with the Dolphins. Speaking of guys who may or may not be here, speaking of cap hits and money and all those things, I mean, nobody's talking about the cheetah. He's been gone for a while, but that's another big choice they have to make.
It's no big choice at all. You cut him the first chance you get. It's a $52 million cap hit. You can save $23 million of it by cutting him outright. I think that's much more valuable for Tyreek than holding Tyreek to split the dead cap money between 26 and 27. You're probably going to set the dead cap record no matter what. I think the 49ers have that right now with it's a little over $100 million of dead cap in 2025, which is ironic because they are like a half a game out of first place in the NFC West while having all that dead cap. So dead cap doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's viewed as like the boogeyman. And if you have a lot of it, it's not a good thing because your cap commitments aren't going to players that are on the roster. But In the case of Miami, I would kind of encourage them to use this year upcoming with these other operation changes that are coming to, whether it's Tua, whether it's Tyreek, whether it's Austin Jackson, whether it's anybody else on the roster, whether that's Bradley, like whoever else, like mature contracts with large cap amounts, your cap commitments in 2026, it's going to be a reset year anyway. So you might as well embrace it. And in the case of Tyreek Hill, I can still get cap compliant just by moving on from Tyreek Hill. I don't need to wait it out until June 2nd so I can save another $8 million in 2026 cap space, because it doesn't help me in March when it's time to sign players onto the roster that are going to be here this year. So embrace with warmth the dead cap, because it's going to be a good thing for you in the long run if whoever comes in to run this organization from a football operation standpoint does it right.
That's what you get on Locked On Dolphins from Kyle Krabs and a whole lot more. Z, I got to get your thoughts on Tyreek real quick before we hit the break, because he had something to say on social media after this happened with Tua. Threw up a peace sign with a popular GIF that's going around where a guy just flashes a peace sign and turns around. And my thought on Tyreek is he seems to be the first guy that Tua lost in that locker room. Last year came out and said some things. And to me, like a guy who's that influential, a guy who's that big of a star, who's that big of a presence, when that happens, I mean, that's not good for the younger players, not good for the locker room, but Tyreek's still taking shots at Tua.
Yeah, I mean, he's acting like he doesn't want to be here, so just give him what he wants. At the end of the day, take the hit and move on. I mean, whoever the GM is going to be here, he's going to have to take his lumps the first year, as in the salary cap problems, because it's overdone with some of these contracts, and you take the hits for 1 year, then a little bit softer the next year, and then you can start building your team that you want as a GM and whoever the head coach is. If it's Mike or if it's someone else, you're going to take those lumps next year in the year after, and then see what you have, because you got to pull the Band-Aid off fast and let's get going. That's
Jeff Zgonina right here with your Dolphins Squad Show, as well as the NFL Players Squad Show. You can catch Z on that here on the Locked On Podcast Network as well. Kyle Krabs, Locked On Dolphins Podcast. I'm Jim Grieshaber. Call me Gries. When we come back, turn the page. Bob Seger. What are the Dolphins going to look like with Quinn Ewers, not Zach Wilson, Quinn Ewers under center, the 7th round pick, gets the dream shot of a lifetime for everybody who's ever taken a snap on a football field. We'll talk about that next. It's Dolphins Squad Show on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and the #1 sports podcast network.
Today's Dolphins Squad Show is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift, when a receiver gets hot, the defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into every moment throughout the game with live spreads and money lines that update instantly, player props that update as guys heat up, and you can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. Keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, and every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the NFL action this season, visit FanDuel.com to place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you.
There we go. Kyle Krabs, Jeff Zgonina, Jim Grieshaber, call me Gries. And a lot of things happening in Dolphins land right now as the team sits here. They got to within a game of 500, still were alive in that playoff race, although barely, and they wouldn't have made it anyway before that Pittsburgh game. But the win streak, the way that they turned things around and won 4 in a row and 5 out of 6, guys, it was inspiring. And you're sitting there thinking, okay, the team didn't quit. They didn't quit on Mike. They didn't quit on each other. They didn't quit on themselves. And then you go out in Pittsburgh and, you give up 28 unanswered points. It's offense, it's defense, it's all the above, Z. And when I look at the Miami Dolphins right now, you talked about this earlier in the show, and I think this is a really important point. And I want to get to the $20 million, too. I don't want to forget about that they would owe Tua if he gets hurt, because we're going to get Kyle's explanation on that, because it's the best explanation I've heard about it or seen about it, and we'll get Kyle's explanation on that. But with Quinn Ewers set to take the job over coming into this week, right? You got Cincinnati coming in. This team's a complete mess. Joe Burrow, of all people, another one of those $50 million quarterbacks, came out last week and said, basically paraphrasing that, he's not loving the game. He's not having fun right now. And they went out and they played like it on Sunday. Burrow, one of the worst games of his career. And it's just a tough situation in Cincinnati. And that's a couple of weeks after they had a big win over the same team, by the way. And Burrow played a great game against the Ravens. So when I look at the Bengals coming in, they're in all kinds of disarray too, Kyle. But with the Dolphins now moving forward with Quinn Ewers, people want to know your thoughts. Why Ewers and not Zach Wilson? Because you brought Wilson in clearly to be the backup. You draft Ewers in the 7th round. This kid was originally, when he was at Texas, people were talking about him as a potential first rounder. Got hurt his last year there. The fans there wanted to keep Arch Manning on the field. They kind of ran him out of town in Austin. So when I look at Ewers getting the nod over Wilson, what does that say to you about Ewers, and what does that say to you about Wilson?
I think for Zach, probably what you feared it might have been at the top when you found out that he was the backup quarterback the Dolphins were going to sign, which was potentially a square peg in a round hole, where he's a athletic player whose best work has come outside of the structure of the play. Whereas Quinn Ewers, going back to Texas, his best moments typically come inside the structure of the play. We're looking for somebody to execute the offense as it is designed. Mike, a lot of their passing concepts, it's all designed to optimize the primary target. Is that because of Tua? Is that Mike's ideology? I don't know how to parse through that fully and accurately and responsibly. But what I do know is Ewers at Texas, and Steve Sarkisian came out and said this, there's things that we do that are similar to what the Dolphins do at the NFL level. Quinn Ewers on his Gruden camp with Barstool, it was 50 minutes where he did the old school Gruden QB school and had a sit down with Ewers. They talked about some of the similarities and things that have been pulled from Miami that come down to Texas. So familiarity with the concepts, familiarity with the rhythm of the plays, the ability to work the play design within structure. Versus Zach, I think, has much better physical tools. I think he's more athletic. He's got a stronger arm. But inside structure is not a strength. And if you're looking for somebody to play convicted, that was the word that Mike McDaniel used, was convict. We need convicted quarterback play. The guy who's familiar with operating the timing and the structures of the plays, regardless of the precision of it all, I'm not surprised that they gravitate towards that. And as much as Mike McDaniel would tell you that's all it's about, there's also an element of you've got a quarterback you're going to pay $54 million to. Zach Wilson's an expiring contract you would have to re-sign, and Quinn Ewers is a rookie on a 7th-round contract that's under contract in Miami for 3 more years, making dirt money. That plays into this no matter what they would tell you, and they put on the brave face at the press conferences, and they told you Quinn gives us the best chance to win. And I think both things can be true, but you can't tell me Quinn's contract status relative to the backdrop of Tua's contract doesn't factor into this at all.
And what about the $20 million for Tua? We talked about it before the show, and basically what I brought up to Kyle before the show is I had read somewhere, read 1,000 things, obviously, getting ready for the show, but I had read somewhere that Tua is owed $20 million if he gets hurt this year, and that's in 2027. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kyle, but if he gets hurt this year and he can't play in the future, they owe him another $20 million. So how much do you think that factors in, and what's the real explanation behind that?
Yeah, so his salary next year is fully guaranteed with the exception of $1 million of it that's workout bonuses and per game active bonuses. So 54 of the $55 million he is owed next year is fully guaranteed. In 2027, when we hit I think it's the 3rd or the 5th day of the league year this March in 2026, he will have $3 million of his 2027 salary that fully guarantees that is currently guaranteed for injury. And then an additional $17 million of 2027 compensation is guaranteed for injury if he were to get hurt at any point between now and 2027, if he's still on the same contract and he can't pass a physical for the 2027 season. So that's what your risk is if there's a catastrophic injury, whether it's an Achilles that doesn't heal right, or if it's head injuries in which he can't get a doctor to clear him for return to play, you would be on the hook for the $20 million in 2027 if that happened at any point while under contract with his current contract from now until 2027. So removing all of that from the equation as well, I'm sure is something that it's just that little extra bit of assurances now that the Dolphins aren't playing for the playoffs.
That's the kind of stuff you get from Kyle Krabs right here on Locked On Dolphins. And Jeff Zgonina, as I look at Mike McDaniel, and you know, it's been comedy this year on some levels watching his press conferences, but when he talks about convicted quarterback play, is that not saying that the previous guy didn't care? I mean, that's what I'm getting from that.
Well, it could be a whole bunch of things, you know. I mean, was he convicted on his reads? Was he convicted on his play calling? Was it, you know, who knows what Mike meant by it? I'm not sticking up for Mike, and you know, I'm just saying it could be anything. You know, we're not in the room, so when he says something, you just got to, you know. I think Tua was convicted in certain things, but it just didn't show on the tape, you know. And it's, you know, I just really can't answer that one because I don't know Tua. I'm not in the room. I'm not there to. I can't judge it from outside. I'm not gonna sit on my lazy boy here and be, you know, one of these guys that's gonna go out and say something that I know nothing about.
I'll sit on the lazy boy and say something.
Okay.
I don't have a problem doing that. You can go back to the interception against New England that was negated by penalty on the first possession. And then you can go back to the interception to open the game against the Chargers. And I think those two plays are examples of there's a play action fake, and it's that glance slant that Miami loves to hit in stride off that play action passing. And Tua takes his play action fake, and his eyes go immediately to that target. And we've seen him hit it a billion times, right? And it's within the construct of play fake, feet set, access is there, throw the ball. And he hasn't done it this year. And it's like, what is the uncertainty in this? Was made to order based off the look. This was your bread and butter for 3 years. This was the money concept that got you rolling and got guys the ball in stride into the middle of the field where they could potentially go across. Like the touchdown pass that they had to Waddle this year against Atlanta. Remember, he catches the inbreaker off the far side of the field and he comes all the way across and gets the sideline and runs it for a touchdown. There's been times this year, for whatever reason, the first window is there, your feet are set, you're looking at it, and you double clutch, or you don't throw, and then you work to something else, or you get outside a structure, or you wait for that receiver to pass through a defender, like it happened against the Chargers, and then you try to throw it. And Waddle kind of lets up because, I'm through the first window, I'm not getting the ball anymore, but Tua doesn't move to a different progression, and he tries to work it to you in a second window, and Waddle gears down, and then he's got to try to gear back up, and the ball's off his frame, it gets tipped up in the air, gets intercepted. Things like that, like on the tape, you've seen him do it. He could probably could have done it the last 3 years with his eyes closed, as far as the comfort of what the look is, and we want to get the ball to this area of the field. And for whatever reason, this year, there's just been instances where you're looking at it, it's like, dude, your feet are set. You're set to throw. You're looking at it. There's nobody in the throwing window. And yet we don't throw. And that, for me, when I hear Mike McDaniel say, I need convicted quarterback play, I look at reps like that, where it's there to be made. And for whatever reason, whatever we see, whatever we think we see, whatever we think we feel, that play's not made. And it's like, man, you add 3 or 4 of those up across the course of a game, it's another 80 passing yards a game, and maybe guy breaks one for an explosive play and a touchdown. And if you just leave that on the table, and it's been every week. Now, there's limitations with the offensive line, and the skill group's not as good without Tyreek Hill, and the passing distribution at times, the spacing of the routes can make it harder for the quarterback. Like Kurt Warner's gone into that, looking at the Dolphins tape, and the spacing here makes it really tough. And there's not a lot of eligibles. Or the interception that we threw against the Steelers, there's 2 guys downfield and we mass protect on a play action shot. All that can also exist. But then there's the plays that it's right there to make, and we don't make it this year. I think that's what Mike McDaniel's referring to.
Kurt Warner does an excellent job breaking down quarterback play in the NFL. Had a lot of good things to say about the Dolphins offense, actually. But before we hit the break, Z, Tua has not thrown for 173 yards since week 9, more than 173 yards in a game. And, you know, obviously the picks, 15 and 14 games, but only 4 games over 250 yards, 1 300-yard game for a guy who threw for 46. That's the one that blows my mind the most. This guy threw for 4,600 yards and led the league 2 years ago, Z.
Yeah, we don't have a deep threat, and Tua's been off, so we've run the ball more. It seems like during that win streak we had, and that's the bread and butter of the team this year was the run game. So the course numbers are going to be down. I mean, you throw as many if you go back to 2 years ago and throw as many times that year this year, he probably have 30 picks. His confidence is not there. So Mike took the ball out of his hand and let other guys make plays.
Let me ask you, Z, before break, you just triggered something in me. What is it like to see a guy lose confidence like that? What's it like for a player? Can you take us inside the minds of an NFL athlete once you lose that confidence in a violent, fast-moving sport like this?
Well, you hope that person gets it back, because you can't think about it. Again, it's one play and clear. You got to keep moving forward. And I've seen guys dwell on their play. I've had coached guys that once they had a bad play, it took games to get them out of it. And it's like, hey, dude, you got to just like I said, you shoot yourself out of it. If you're the 3-pointers, you can't make them, just keep shooting. Same thing, in football. You just got to keep going out there. You can't think about it. You can't dwell on your bad play. You got to move forward and play better. Or go see a psychiatrist or something. I don't care. Just let's go. You can't think about it. You just got to go play.
And teammates have said good things about Quinn Ewers. We'll talk about him on the other side. And you want to talk about convicted quarterback play. What about the Bengals? Joe Burrow just got off the podium and dropped a bomb all over Cincinnati. We'll talk about that on the other side. It's your Dolphins Squad Show, Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Real quick break on YouTube, and then we're back to wrap it up. And, of course, right after we finish live on YouTube, we go and upload. You download Spotify, Apple, iHeart, Stitcher, Podbean, and, of course, OTT, over-the-top television, with Roku. Gries, Z, and Kyle wrapping it up on the other side. Dolphins Squad Show. All right, Kyle, I'm coming right to you with this one. And I haven't been able to watch it because we're on live as it happens. And a lot of times when things break, it happens during our show. But Joe Burrow just dropped another bomb on Cincinnati. And basically what the headline says, and I just want to make sure I get this right. Let's see. Joe Burrow not committing to a long-term future in Cincinnati is basically what the headline is. And he was cryptic with his answers, but this is 2 weeks in a row, Kyle, from the franchise in Cincinnati.
Yeah, I think Joe kind of played coy, where he says something and then the week goes on and then he gets up on the podium after the couple days later and does his weekly press availability. And it's like, it kind of felt like this got blown out of proportion. I think what Joe Burrow's doing, I look at what he did last year when they were trying to figure out paying T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. And the whole Trey Hendrickson saga was just a few months old instead of a year and a half old, which is what it eventually ended up being. And Hendrickson never got a new deal by the Bengals, and he wanted to be there. That is a team that historically is pretty low on the spectrum of their cash spend. They don't spend super high in free agency. They're not very aggressive. They kind of, especially since they've committed to paying Joe Burrow, they've been we're going to draft and develop and replace, but their drafting and developing process has not been particularly impactful. And that's why the Bengals defense finds itself averaging 31 points per game this season, giving up. So I think Joe is just trying to send the right messaging to ownership and to management that he's displeased with how some things are going. And he's trying to use his leverage as a guy that has long-term security because they've signed him to a long-term contract extension and he's getting $55 million a year on average. He's trying to push them out of their comfort zone to start giving this team a chance to level up and start to compete more. And it worked with T. Higgins. I think the old Bengals would not have paid T. Higgins a contract extension. Now, that contract extension ends up being extremely favorable to Cincinnati when you look at the guarantee structure and how much of that he's really guaranteed versus how much of it now just becomes like a 1-year play and pay as you go type scenario. It's a minor detail, and that's Cincinnati got what they wanted out of that contract too. But I take a lot of what Joe Burrow's saying now is rattling the cage of the Brown family and management of the Bengals to try to wake them up and say, we can't keep doing what we're doing here because we are falling behind the pace of a lot of other teams in the AFC. and you got one of the best quarterbacks in the league, we can't continue on this way, and I'm not happy with the way that it's going.
You think about Dan Marino when you think about Joe Burrow, at least I do. I think about Marino going to the Super Bowl so early in his career, everybody thinking he's going to go back 100 times, and I was thinking the same thing about Joe Burrow, but now it's 3 years in a row, and can we call them the Bungles again? It's 3 years in a row, no playoffs in Cincinnati.
Yeah, I mean, like Kyle just said, I mean, he's trying to shake that tree because, I mean, just on their defense alone, the last 2 years, they fired a coordinator, brought a new guy in, and there's no change. They don't really bring any new players in. Trey held out, tried to get a new deal. Now he's injured, and he hasn't really played all year, and there's just nothing going on there in the defense, and Joe was frustrated, There's going to be close games, but there were no close games, for him, to do his magic a lot this year. A, because he was hurt, and B, because the defense was giving up so many freaking points, I'd be frustrated too.
Yeah, 31-plus points a game given up by the Bengals defense, Kyle. This is a good week for Quinn Ewers to make his debut.
Yeah, I mean, this team, you go across the board. They are 31st in the NFL in net yards allowed per pass attempt. They've given up 31 touchdown passes thus far this season. They're giving up 5.3 yards per carry. They're giving up 31 points per game. Like, you go right down the list. There's tons of opportunity. And I think what's interesting about this game is you kind of started to hear some of the stuff early in the season about it's hard for Mike to call an offense with a quarterback that can't get hit or with the skill sets kind of limiting for their offense. Now you get a chance to go out and put some different things out on tape. You want to be a little bit more aggressive down the field. You want to call some more aggressive protections and put more guys out into eligibles in order to try to stress the field a little bit more. He should feel compelled to do that with a guy like Quinn Ewers because there's not $20 million in 2027 riding on if it doesn't go well with Quinn if he takes a bad hit and unfortunately would get hurt on a rep. But like, you have a chance to show against one of the worst defenses in the league what you are capable of calling from a design perspective and what can be different with Quinn Ewers out there. And I expect them to have success running the ball. I think if they're smart, they'll lean super heavy into the run. They'll try to play the time of possession game and keep Burrow on the opposing sideline. They'll not make life harder than it needs to be for Ewers and air the ball all over the place. But off of some of those run game actions that they get, what kind of play action concepts are you working? What areas of the field are you trying to attack? You can go back to early in the year. I think the first 3 weeks of the season, they ran like these double deep outs to the field 2 or 3 times a game, and they didn't hit a single one of them because the ball was floating or the ball was out of bounds or we left it too far inside or it came too short or it held up in the air too long and it became a contested catch. I'm really interested to go back and look at some of those early season things that they tried to do on tape and see if they start to show back up again across the final 3 games, because it kind of felt like they put them in their back pocket and said, these aren't hitting, we're going to stop calling them.
And Z, we've talked about Quinn Ewers, and I asked you earlier what the confidence level might be in a guy like him right now coming into play as a rookie, but the guys are saying the right things. And I think Aaron Brewer, who's been great this year for Miami, I think he said it best. He said Ewers is a dog, and he talked about how he's frustrated the linebackers in practice when they run the scout team and has had some success against that first team defense, and that Bradley Chubb said Ewers is a dog. And so I really appreciate that his teammates are coming out already. I mean, I love it. I love that about football anyway. They're coming out, they're giving him confidence already. But when you have that mindset and you're going at it every day in practice and your teammates are calling you a dog, that's what you want out of the QB position. So he's already got that box checked.
Yeah, that's what I said. The guys are going to be excited for him, especially defensive guys, because usually that's the kid that's running the scout team. Now, I'm going to say one thing, and most teams, the coach will circle where the quarterback's supposed to throw the ball on those cards on that scout team. All right. And it does get frustrating as you're out there on defense and, you're getting lit up sometimes by, the third string quarterback. But again, they know what window is going to be open on every play against the defense. Because again, the defensive coaches usually tell the quarterback where to throw the ball, before the snap, either on the card or in the huddle. But I'm glad that, the guys are going to back him up saying the right things, and they're all excited for the young kid, to go out there and shine.
Oh, Kyle, we know he doesn't lack in confidence. He launched his own brand this year with his own logo in spite of never having started an NFL game yet. And, maybe he's just manifesting. Who knows?
Yeah, it's I think his social account, I don't know if it's Quinn or not, but I think they sent out a share on Tuesday night before it was announced on Wednesday morning. It was like with the merch link and like, oh, get your stuff for the holidays. And then the next day it drops. He's the starting quarterback for Miami. So I got a good laugh out of that. But that's this chapter of collegiate athletes, right? With NIL, and now that they're empowered to do a lot of this kind of stuff because they're structured to do it, and it's not so under the table with compensation at the college level. It's name, image, and likeness, and you get 4 years in college to build your brand. And we're just now seeing the first generations of this being out in the open, hitting the league. So I'm not surprised a guy like Quinn, that was a former 5-star recruit that committed to Ohio State and then transferred to Texas. That's a whole lot of blue blood organizations and a whole lot of attention that you get as a prep quarterback and a college quarterback, and the platform that he played on Texas, who has their own network on cable television. So not too surprising that Quinn's got that in his back pocket.
South Lake Carroll, it's a juggernaut in Texas, no doubt. And when I talked earlier about 2023, Z, and what a year it was for Tua, that year is the year when Quinn Ewers became nationally known. That year is the year he won the starting job in Texas. And, when they just crushed Oklahoma State in the Big 12 championship game, and he set records for yardage and things like that. And you're just looking at that kid going, wow, he's a big time baller, going to be a first rounder. Senior year, had the injury, didn't go as well for him, slipped a lot at Texas. And then he ends up here in the 7th round, which is crazy because you're talking about a guy as a potential first rounder, slips all the way to the 7th round. And then he still ends up starting in his rookie year. It's this game, this sport is nuts.
Oh yeah, again, you just never know when you're gonna be called up to play. They always say you're one play away, and that's the truth. You never know. You can be standing there on the sideline, sunflower seeds in your mouth one play, and the next play you're in the game. So I'm sure he's gonna be ready. Mike's gonna get him ready. The defense is gonna get him ready on the scout team. Give him some good looks this week, and and hopefully he has great success. Who knows? This could be the start of something good for the kid.
Definitely gets the chance to do it. And, that's all anybody can start with is a chance, right? You get the chance, you get on the field. And I had a coach that used to tell us all the time, play your way on the field and then don't play your way off. It's that simple, which is not easy. It might be a simple concept, but definitely not easy. So the Bengals coming into town, they're a hurting unit. They missed the playoffs again. A lot of people thinking maybe they should have shut down Joe Burrow. Let's get into what we think will happen in this game on Sunday, guys. And we'll be here live, by the way, right after the game with your Dolphins Squad Show on the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one sports podcast network. And Kyle, we've talked a lot about the Dolphins offense and the game plans this season, right? When they're winning games, I said it last week, Tua wasn't throwing for over 200 yards anyway, was throwing it right around 20, less than 25 times a game for sure. So that's another element for Ewers. He's not going to come in and throw it all over the yard like Marino when he replaced Woodley.
Yeah, I think for this matchup for Miami, you got to look at the run game. I don't think Cincinnati's anywhere near as physical up front as what Pittsburgh is, even without TJ Watt. Pittsburgh still kind of did a good job kind of stacking the point of attack. I thought the Dolphins tight ends and fullback Alec Ingold had a really disappointing performance against Pittsburgh with how they kind of had it taken to them. And that's the engine that drives the run game when you want to run out on the perimeter. So I think they need to play better. I think they will play better. I'm interested to see how Miami handles the opportunity to get back at home. They've got 2 games at home these next 2 weeks. They have historically, even when they've not been in the thick of it, they've been a better team at home. I don't expect like the weather to be an issue or anything like that as far as like, since he's coming down to hot Florida in December. I don't think anything like that, but you're at home and it's a chance to bounce back, and you're playing for your coach. You're playing for yourselves. You're playing for long-term stability in Miami. How much pride do you have, right? Like how deep do your competitive juices flow? I think some guys are going to have a chance to tell us a lot about themselves in this game. I expect them to play inspired. And I would say that the loss of Minkah Fitzpatrick, who was described as week to week with a calf injury, week to week with 3 weeks left, that doesn't sound like it's very good for seeing Minkah again this year, but we'll see. I think that'll hurt in this matchup because you're talking about a rookie in Dante Trader and another rookie in Jason Marshall playing in the slot, per what Anthony Weaver said today during the press availability. So I think there will be points. It's Miami's responsibility to control the clock and minimize the possessions so that they at home can try to get the right bounce of the ball and win the game.
All right, Z, what do you think about this matchup on Sunday? Bengals coming to Miami.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I think we're going to run the ball, you know, to help the young kid out and shrink the game, like Kyle just said, and then work the tight ends. You know, I was watching the game Cincinnati last week. They had a hard time covering the tight ends, you know, and I think that, you know, which is good for, you know, Ewer, you know, because it's right there in the middle. It's not like he's got to look outside or anything, you know, just run the guy down the seam. I mean, he's got a chance to make some big plays there, you know, and then defensively, you know, Cincinnati's O-line has trouble with games, you know, and hopefully, you know, we even, you know, the guys dial up some good defensive line stunts, you know, up front, you know, and get some pressure on the quarterback and, you know, and stop the run game too.
The fading Buccaneers coming in after that, but still a pretty good team, Kyle. And of course, you look at the Patriots to wrap up the season. This might be the Dolphins' last real shot at a win this year.
Yeah, it's it depends on how well Quinn Ewers keeps his head above water. You know, it's a tough draw to go to New England, but they could very easily be locked into their seeding and not have anything to play for and play backups, right? Like, what if they're the 2 seed, they clinch the division, but they can't catch the Broncos? The Broncos have the head-to-head tiebreaker, so they're a game and a half in front of them with 3 games left to play. Like, it would not surprise me if that's the case, if they took that opportunity to rest. So you play them all, you're going to see what happens. But I think the expectations are going to be very quickly defined by what opportunities Quinn Ewers gets and how competent he appears to be in executing.
You know, we could always get out the crystals. We could pray. You know what I mean? We could get out the vision boards and just close our eyes and think, Joe Burrow next year, Joe Burrow next year. Keep talking, Joe. Make it untenable. Make it unlivable in Cincinnati. And I mean, some Dolphin fans will be thinking, what do you think about that, Kyle? Just your initial thought about a possible Joe Burrow trade for anyone, but for the Dolphins in particular.
The Bengals made Carson Palmer retire and sit out a year before they did anything to play ball with what Carson Palmer wanted. I would expect they would be similarly inclined to make Joe Burrow's life living hell and make him go through hell and high water before they even remotely entertain the idea. So if that's on your radar, I'd say you're probably a few years away, and it's going to have to get a whole lot worse before Joe Burrow goes the retirement route to even try to facilitate that.
Z?
Yeah, I say the same way. Cincinnati does things, you know, a little old school.
Yeah.
You know, they make their coaches coach out their contracts. They don't give anything up, you know, so I don't see that ever happening.
Well, we can dream, right? Maybe on Sunday, the Bengals and the Dolphins will give us that opportunity. But I'll tell you this, guys, it's always fun doing the show with both of you. Kyle, outstanding job, man, as always, on all this stuff, the Judon stuff, and, of course, the Tua stuff. Yesterday, busy day for Kyle Krabs on Locked On Dolphins. Jeff Zgonina, it's the NFL Analyst Show, right, Z? Or the NFL Players? I'm screwing it all up.
NFL Players Squad Show.
The NFL Players Squad Show with Jeff Zgonina and a bunch of other former NFL players. And, of course, we are back here Sunday right after the game, and then next Wednesday with your Dolphins Squad Show. And, look, it's Ewers' time in Miami now. Tua goes to the bench for the Dolphins, who are 6-8 and really don't have a whole lot to play for. So let's see who can do what. And you start with that rookie QB, and you never know, you might get some of that magic that you had all the way back in the early 80s when Dan Marino took over for David Woodley in his first year. Now, Marino was a first-round pick. Ewers slid before the draft, but there are some similarities there, a lot of similarities with their confidence and the swagger of Quinn Ewers with Dan Marino. He's got a lot to do on the field, though, before we can mention his name and Dan's in the same sentence again. Thank you so much for being here, guys, for the Dolphins Squad Show, #1 podcast network in the world, the Locked On Podcast Network. It's Kyle, it's Z, it's Gries. We appreciate you so much for helping us contribute to the #1 sports podcast network in the world, the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.